Hey, this is Coach Will Humphreys of Beyond the Blocks. We have a special episode with James Daniels, NSAF, head of sprints and hurdles and high performance. My co-hosts Lonnie Davis and Anthony Lewis were not able to join us for this episode. So please enjoy, like and subscribe, and thank you for riding with Beyond the Blocks. Hey, welcome back to Beyond the Blocks. We're here with a special episode. I'm your host, Will Humphreys, and we got joining us today. We got James Daniels, NSAF head of sprints and hurdles, and he's also the head of Daniels High Performance. So how you doing today, James?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me back. Looking forward to tonight's subject matter, and prayerfully this will be something to really be of assistance to the audience. Not just on the championship season, but leading into the postseason as well as into AAU and UCTF.
Perfect. So what do you want to talk to us about this evening?
Well, I think based on, the requests and the things you guys have shared with me, we're going to talk a little bit about preparation for the championship season and how to go about using what I call a wave-like periodization plan by matching, restoration and, the actual workout and the volumes together to give an athlete an opportunity to compete at a high level. And then maybe unlock some other thoughts for coaches as it relates to what type of workout should they be doing during the championship season and things of that nature. So, hopefully that will help, the audience and number of people to understand how to prepare for these. Right now, everybody's doing an incredible job throughout the country getting the athletes ready, but I've gotten some even DMs myself recently on, what to do during the championship season or the state meets and things like that, and then how to transition into the postseason to these, these shoe meets, whether it's Nike or New Balance or Adidas, and Brooks. I get a message here. So asking me like, hey, after the state meets over with, how long should I give an athlete off? What should I do to get ready for the postseason shoe meets that are all over the country? And then after that, then how do I get prepared to release the athletes back into like an AAU or USATF type of scheduling? So it's been an interesting, last couple of weeks for sure. And like I said, Beyond the Blocks has been a real blessing as it relates to just, me getting the opportunity to share some things that I consider what I call best practices. That may not be the best for everybody, but based on the things that I've been able to do and accomplish over the last 30 years or so, they seem to work pretty well.
Yeah, no, we love having you back. When we had you the first time, it's like you dropped so much knowledge, and we've got so many messages. Like you got messages, we got messages, DMs. We just gave so much value to the audience. So, like, I know a lot of people are going to be excited to hear what you have to say tonight.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I guess we can start. You want to go ahead on and share the screen, and I can go over the graphic real quickly. And, this right here is called Championship Cellular Restoration and Micro-Cycle Programming. And track and field is built, off of the body recovering, and so the body is a cell, and so you have to generally get it in a position where it can recover and super compensate. And during this time of the year, you're looking at what you call microcycles, and those are 7 to 10 day training plans to get the athlete prepared to do an extraordinary job towards that championship season to run at their best. So what you're looking at here is the blue is the actual workout and the volume of the workout at 70%. And then the yellow represents the restoration. And so what I'm doing and showing there is that you have to match the volume of work with restoration. So if you're working at 70% intensity, then you need to make sure the restoration matches that intensity. If you're working at 90%, 80% throughout that week, then the restoration must match that particular workout system. If then the third week is usually the highest volume. If you're working towards 90 and 100%, or something of that nature, then you want to match that with the restoration activity. And then I think what's important that I like to share, like if you started in the fall or early January, the body develops an accumulation of volume and work that you need to unload on a regular basis every 4 to 6 weeks, and do something that allows the body to super compensate for the work that's been already invested in it. And so this is just a guide. I actually did this particular guide here. This guide is older than some people, but I actually did this in my level 2 class in 2003 when they gave us a problem to solve, an injured athlete, and then we had to solve the problem and also discuss restoration and how we would control the volume of the athlete to make sure the athlete came back to to championship season. So I kind of kept this model from 2003, and been using it since then. And I've been very fortunate to not to have a lot of injuries with the athletes that I've been blessed to work with. I may have had maybe 5 or 6 hamstring injuries over that time frame where they just seem to happen. Things do happen, but it always takes an accumulation for things to kind of happen. I know on the last time I was on, we was talking about training and then coming back and then not doing what you call intensive tempo, or either taking the next available energy system, which would be oxygen. And I didn't really speak to what I meant by that to a degree. So what I was even saying there is that an accumulation of doing things incorrectly will lead to injury. So it does. An injury is not something that happens at a particular just one instance. You get some warning signs of the injury. The athlete does. The athlete would need to speak up to the coach to make sure the coach is aware of them. If you're having some problems, and then with that being said, the coach also need to be aware of the volume that's been put forth over a long period of time to allow the body to unload. So there's the accumulation effect of how a hamstring or a problem can occur with an athlete. So I want to make sure I spoke to that a little bit from the last time that I kind of dawned on me. I was like, well, I don't want anybody to think that injury happens just because of 1 week of training or something like that. It's a accumulation of things that have occurred that will contribute to that particular situation. But one of the most important things as you move into championship season and do what I call cellular restoration is that really you need to have a plan to do certain things every time after practice. A lot of times athletes will do the workout and then the coach gets distracted, or everybody's talking and everybody's got their book bag and they just leave the track. So when they do that, they're leaving the track, not unloading. That's the first opportunity to really unload and restore your body, is to cool down correctly, do 3 to 5 static stretches, or either the coach should have a planned cool down program for the athlete to participate in, for them to be able to ward off the injuries, get rid of any hamstring aches and things like that. Set some cold tubs up, things like that. But it's really important to have what I call daily restoration. So if you're just waiting till the championship season to basically do restoration work, that's generally a little bit too late. And that's when you see some kids, unfortunately, get dinged up in that process. And then again, like I said, injuries do happen, but I think if we can be proactive in minimizing those opportunities for injuries to happen, following a graph like this or these particular concepts always seem to benefit the athlete and the coach, and you can always move on from there. Again, like daily restoration is very, very important. It allows the body to recover from the work capacity, the speed, the stress of just training. And then more importantly, it just gives them an opportunity to keep their body fresh and guard against against injury. So a weekly plan during championship season is important in terms of strategically making sure that the athletes are doing what they're supposed to do, and then everybody gets into the habit of cooling down. And again, like, cooling down is probably the Achilles heel of a lot of programs, because when you get done working out, you're ready to quit, and then you got to spend an additional 15 minutes of getting everybody to kind of round up and do the cool down, do the jog. So even in my training system here, and when I work with the kids in the Nike Elite program, I try to encourage the coaches to get a planned cool down of how they're going to do their cool down at the end of the workout. Because that's one of the most important times of the workout. Really, is the cool down from all the work they've done. Kind of thus far. So we just kind of go from there, and then there's something called delayed onset muscle soreness, which is called DOMS. So if you're like, say if you're a long to short coach, and you wait till the last 5 to 6 weeks to really start cranking it up and doing some speed or some sprinting, then you generally would get something called DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And so you have to guard against that by definitely having a plan in place to address the restorational aspect of how the hamstrings are feeling, the quads, the glutes or what have you. So there are some people that do that, that model of coaching. And if you're going to do that, then this lends itself to a deeper discussion on making sure that if you are a long and short coach and you're doing speed the latter part of your season, then restoration is probably one of the most important things that you could utilize to guard against a lot of soreness and hamstring injuries for the athlete.
So it's funny you say that too. Like, I was rushing home so we could do this interview, and every time we have an intense workout, I have my daughter take an ice bath, and I actually forgot today. So thank you for that. After we're done, she's got to take her ice bath because we compete in 2 days. So yeah.
Yeah, we're good. But yeah, so that, like, the whole idea again, this is any information that I'm sharing with anyone is always based on what I consider best practices. Everybody may have an opinion about it and all that good stuff, but at the end of the day, I try to make sure that anything that I speak on is based strictly around the science of the sport and creating what I call a model of wellness or care for the athlete. And I try to teach that to them about caring for their bodies on and off the track. And so, again, like this graph here, like I said, I use this in my level 2 class. And in my level 2, Jeremy Fisher, who's gone on to coach Will Clay and a lot of great people in the jumps, was in my level 2 class. We were classmates in there, and Hassan Stamps was in my group at that time, and so we had some really great people. Eric Campbell out of Atlanta. Dr. Raylene Ross was in there, and Aubrey Dempsey at the time, her maiden name, she was at Clemson. So we had a really good, we had a super great class, and this opportunity to just continually give back and share the things that I've learned over the years from being at these high performance summits at USATF, where they brought in some of the world's top recovery specialists, in the world to come in and speak to us in those seminars. And so this just, again, me taking the notes and kind of giving back to the sport and being able to answer these questions here on this interview and this podcast situation here. So very appreciative of those opportunities right now.
And so, and thank you for that. With regard to like trying to help coaches with their athletes and parents as well, I got 2 questions for you. What's like some specifics, some specifics that a coach can put together for his athletes to do with regard to the cool down, and then what's some specific stuff that some parents can do at home or athletes can do at home on their own to help with their restoration?
Yeah, some of the things that I try to do after practice, I try to do like a 3-minute or a 5-minute jog. Immediately after that, have them get something to drink, and then we go to a 3 to 5 minute easy jog, and then I have them doing it with between 3 to 5 static stretches where they got to hold them for 30 seconds or so. Way back, I used to be really meticulous about it. I used to start off. I work from the principle of progressive overloading. So I would start, the first 2 weeks with 20-second holds. Then another 2 weeks we go to 30-second holds. Then another 2 weeks we go to 40-second holds. Then another 2 weeks we go to 60-second holds. So that gave me a 6-week pattern of gradually teaching the athlete to get, more and more flexible, creating better range of motion in their hips and the static stretch. And then, that would be it. So one of those things, absolutely is, 3 to 5 minute jogs. And I've done crossfits, which everybody may call like diagonals. We'll do a number of those as well. Sometimes I do 6 times 50-meter turnarounds, just working on form running, turn around, come back. But ultimately will always end up with static stretching. And I used to PNF stretch, the partner neuromuscular facilitation stretches, the PNF stretches where you had a partner that would move, the athlete's legs into a range of motion that were uncomfortable for them. So I've used PNF stretching as a mechanism and mode of recovery. And then on my restoration days, and early on, I used to in practice and then go right into a yoga session for 15 minutes. That's when I used to use that P90X yoga back in the day. So those of you who are familiar with P90X, I used to use that P90X yoga way back. And I've done T25 recovery when those videos were out as part of my recovery right after practice. And so yeah, those are some things that are, there's enough information out now where you can find, recovery videos or yoga, Pilates and things like that. Again, the whole idea is just restoring the muscle, breaking up any lactate and trying to, restoring what I call the elasticity properties back to the muscle as quickly as possible so that the athlete can be prepared to do the work the next day.
Mm-hmm. Are you a proponent of athletes just doing yoga in general, like once or twice a week, like in between their other training?
Yes, I am. We try to, like I said, when I use this chart, I use this chart in multiple ways. But early in the year, when I'm in the fall, we spent each this is a 6-week thing. So graph 1 is 2 weeks, 2 is 2 weeks, and 3 is 2 weeks. So that there gives you 6 weeks of training there, and then that download week on the 4th that you see, that's why I institute some type of yoga or Pilates, something like that when we're unloading and we're also testing during that time frame in the fall. But yeah, I'm a strong believer of that as well. And again, I think that's what's helped me keep a lot of athletes, extremely healthy. Is by utilizing those things with them, and then it ends up being fun for a lot of them. I think that the most important thing that we can do for the athletes is always continually try to educate them on the why. So they can understand the importance of them taking ownership and of their own progress. So we're as coaches, we're the compass, but they're the navigators. We'll point them in the right direction, but they got to navigate the course and the journey themselves with the information that's provided.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. With the chart here, with the 4-week Micro-Cycles chart, with week 4, would that be like championship week?
Yeah, and so if I move into the track season, then week 4 will be the championship week where the volume is 50% of what's been accumulated through the previous 3 weeks. So week 4, whether it's the fall or championship week, you can take this chart and make it into a microcycle chart too, where this could be 3 weeks out, 7 days, then another 7 days, and then you have a high training load before the championship, and then you just go into a complete unload before that time frame. If you got 2 weeks in, then you can use the 2 and 3 to kind of do that, and then go right into it. So you generally want to start something like this, which is a great question, about 21 days, 21 to 28 days out from a major championship. And then another thing you just kind of trigger my brain on is that a lot of times athletes be like, well, what should I eat the night before? Well, actually restoration throughout the year, any time, but especially during championship season, it really starts on that Tuesday night or Tuesday morning when you wake up. You may have a fudge day on Sunday and eat good and all that stuff, but by Tuesday, you need to be, very intentional about hydration, drinking the water, I try to get the athletes that I work with over the years, drink 40 ounces of water before noon. Yeah. And then try to drink electrolytes for the rest of the day because that's one of the things to push the body back in balance throughout the day is electrolytes. I think water is great, but there's been a lot of great research on water and how it strips the minerals out the body. And then I think, it's an old adage of everybody need to drink water, but if you're mineral depleted, and you keep drinking a lot of water, it washes the minerals out your system, so that it makes you more prone to injury. So, and my favorite example is when you fall out with heat exhaustions or cramps and all that stuff, they don't put water in your blood, in the IV, they put electrolytes in your IV to bring your body back to balance. So if you drink electrolytes throughout the practice, it'll generally keep your body in balance and somewhat help guard against injury because you've been able to provide your body the proper nutrients during the training session to guard against any type of real tissue or ligament damage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So then this time of the year, this creates a really good conversation about two training principles called short to long and long to short. And so I'm definitely a short to long person. But I think what's interesting about that is, as a coach, you have to be able to really do both well because once the season kicks in, the quarter milers go to more of a long to short approach, and the sprint hurdle people stay in that short to long approach because because the more I think sprinting is a vital skill set to have. And so, if you're able to sprint 2 to 3 times a week, that also guards against a number of hamstring injuries, and that comes along with that. But during this time of the year, the championship season, you want to set your workouts in such a way where the athlete gets maximum recovery. So, with that being said, again, I come back on Mondays, with cross fields or grass stuff, turnarounds on the grass. But on that Tuesday during the championship season, if you're a sprinter, we may do anywhere between 640 to 800 meters or sprint work, and I do what you call a stack. So, like, say if I, run a 60, 80, 60 workout, I'll do that 2 times with 3 minutes in between the that particular work, and then we'll wait 15. We'll do what I call a 15-minute active recovery. I believe in don't stand around because you keep the core temperature up, and do what I call lactic shuttle, and kind of keep that going. And then we'll come back and we'll run. We'll build off of the 1 times 120 at max velocity, so you can actually stack those workouts and then come back and put them on the grass on that Wednesday, and then restoration on that Thursday, and then you go race on a Friday or Saturday. So based on when the meet is, you can have 2 speed components in a training session for that. And then, like with the hurdlers, I think it's important that the hurdlers get the chance to simulate max velocity in practice as well as race modeling. So from a race model perspective, you can start at 7.8, with the hurdles based on you up to 6 to 8 of them at that distance, or you can do what I call a staggered hurdle workout where you go the regular hurdles at a regular location, then hurdles 2 and 3 are 8.8, and then 2 hurdles at 7.8, and then 2 hurdles at 7.6, because at that point they're starting to pick up max velocity towards the end, and so you want their nervous system to be able to react to the level of velocity that they're getting to, so the hurdles will come a lot faster. So you try to treat them in a little bit differently towards the end of the run, and the hurdles to kind of get them what I call some nervous system integration work, and get them to anticipate the hurdle better at the end. I think a lot of times when kids are moving that fast, they're trying to get their steps in, but they're not realizing that they need to take 2 steps and they be ready to take off again. Yeah. So you'll see some people stand up at the back of the race because they're creating so much velocity that they're moving too fast. So I think that's really important, to do. And I think again in the hurdles, the hurdles like the sprints. The third hurdle and the hurdles for women and the men are around, women are like 30 meters and the men are about 30 something meters. So that's where, basically max velocity attainment is starting to happen. That hurdle number 3. So at that point you could, if you want to do something simulation wise, you could have the first 3 hurdles at a certain distance, and then hurdle 4, you can move it out to 11.8. For the beginning hurdler, and the hurdlers that's more accomplished can put it at 11.5 for the women, and then 12.5 and 12.0 for the men. So it's just different things you can do to simulate those zones of training. But again, you don't need to hurdle a lot, so that'll be basically your main hurdle workout for the week. And the same thing with the sprints. You can run a stack on that Tuesday and then get an oxygen workout on that Wednesday again, or you can come back and run, a speed endurance workout, like a 180, 150, 180 type of thing, or 120, 150, 180. You can do stuff, things like that, and then use Thursday as a restoration. And then with the quarter milers, you can use anything that's going to put them, over 300 meters. Like you can run 1 times 350 with 3 200s after 15 minutes of rest. After the 350 at race pace, and then you can come back with a tempo day, on that Wednesday restoration work. And the reason why this is important for the people who do long and short, for the quarter mile people, is because you generally want to do your heaviest load for the people who run the 400 and above no later than as Tuesday, because you want to probably want them to have at least 48 to 72 hours away from the race where their body can kind of clear that lactic and get themselves recovered energy system wise. With the short sprints, you can recover generally in 24 to 48 hours. So generally speaking, I run that type of workout on Tuesday. Then I may come back on Wednesday with some short speed work, 2 sets of 30s or 6 times 30 or 6 times 40, 3 minutes of rest. And then, kind of like I said, go from there. But everything that I do is always built around the principle of progressive overload. And so that way I'm monitoring my volume throughout the whole year. And then when I get to championship time, I know exactly what I want to do with the volume and the workouts that connect each other for the athlete to be successful. I think one of the other things I really want to point out to the coaches as well is that there are no magic workouts. There's no YouTubing, and the Instagram and all that stuff like that. The best workout you can find to benefit your athlete is within your own system. I believe that if you are designing your system the appropriate way, the answers you're looking for are right in front of you if you're documenting your workouts, which I document everything that I do. So with that being said, let me give an example. You may have an athlete that'll run fast early in the year, and then the rest of the year, they haven't really done anything, or they have not come close to that time. So you get to the championship season, you be like, man, I just need something good. Let me look on this. Let me call this person. Then they give you a workout to do, and it ended up being the worst thing that ever happened to the athlete because they haven't really, they don't know the workout. And I think one of the most important things to me as a coach, and me understanding long-term development and at a way for my system, or what I want to see happen, is that you always don't want to introduce anything that's going to disrupt what I call the movement literacy of the athlete, or the movement IQ of the athlete, because they're used to your system to know the drill patterns and how you do things. So interrupting the movement literacy and the movement IQ of the athlete is very detrimental during this time of the year by introducing something that you saw somebody else do. It's very important that you just go back to that. So, with that being said, if you go back and look at when your athlete or athletes were running fast and what you were doing, 9 times out of 10, the best thing you can do is actually go back and re-implement that back into your system, and then utilize that 21 to 28 days out before a major competition, because that's when they had the highest velocity attainment and they ran fast, and they PR'd or whatever, and then after that they did. You haven't had a chance to really get them back to that level. So instead of looking at stuff and trying to find something, you as the coach already created the what I call the blueprint. Just go back to what you did. What it was a month ago or whatever, when they first started, and they had PRs, they ran fast, they're nationally ranked or whatever, they're top in the state. Then just go back and look at that and look at what you did. And so that's where that restoration chart comes in at, about the restoration. If you were trained with a heavy load, then okay, so be it. Use that restoration chart that we utilized earlier, and use that to be your guidance in terms of making sure that you got the right restoration leading into the championship season to help the athlete kind of get it together. So what I try to do is what I call revisit, revise, and rethink. I call it my 3 R's. I try to revisit, revise, and rethink what I've done, and I try to figure out, can I take whatever part of the season and implement it right back into the championship season, tweak it a little bit, and then cut it down. Like, say, for instance, you may have been doing it with long rest. You may want to take a minute or two off that rest from previously to challenge the body to a new adaptation. Generally speaking, the body takes 21 to 28, sometimes 35 days to adapt to a new stimulus. So that's why it's important to utilize your own gifts of your coaching that you've already put in there. Just put that back into your system, as opposed to learning something completely new that kind of retards the growth a little bit, for better lack of a word. It just doesn't happen because there's something new and the body's got to learn it And so it's like, okay, what is this? And so, like I said, the human body is smart. The body figures out what works, and then if the muscle memory is done in the appropriate way, it'll automatically signal to the brain what it is, and then it'll pick it right up like it's never left. But if you introduce something new to it, then it's got to relearn some things and relearn how to operate within that new movement, and then that can take some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate you talking about coaches like documenting and keeping data. That's like obviously extremely important, and I don't know if enough coaches do that. I do have a question with regard to, you mentioned hurdles, and I know we've talked about energy systems before when last time you were on the show, and you mentioned that as well. With regard to hurdles specifically, do you recommend doing short to long on the same day, or would you break those up?
Yeah, great question. I think during this time of the year, I try to simulate what's going to happen in the track meet. So to answer your question, I believe you can do the short hurdles in the section, and then again 15-20 minute active rest, and do 2 to 3 reps of your long hurdle workout, because it's not broken up in the track meet generally. So you just got to go right into it. So I think, again, from a management of time and to get things done in a time efficient manner, which also places the body in the right stress, then I would recommend generally this time of the year putting those workouts together, because they're not separate at a conference or district meet. You got to run the rounds to get to the finals. So they'll run the short hurdles probably at 2, and then by 3:30 you on the track running the long hurdles. So again, I just think it's better to teach the body to do that, and make sure that it happens. And then there's some things called like critical zone training that Wilbur Ross had introduced to us back in the late 60s, early 70s, where he ran these 160, 160, 160 workouts with short rest right behind workout, right in his training system. I've taken those workouts that he did those years back, and I just implement those type of things at the end of those workouts as well, to help the energy system be where it needs to be, and develop what I call the urgency of performance that it needs on off of that rest. So again, when you get to this time of the year, championship season, you should look at your championship schedule, and if there's a 15-minute break in between a race, then use 15 minutes in practice, and then do a 90% effort of whatever that race is, and whatever time you're looking for, to condition the body to learn what it's supposed to do. And so that's what I generally do this time of the year. I'm very intentional about looking at the schedule and saying, okay, we got 18 minutes to get this done, so we'll do a max effort, come back 18 minutes and run the distance, 90% of a distance. Like, say if we're running the 200 for 4-2 double, then I have them running 180. And then I just mentioned someone last night. Then you can come back, have a 400 person to have an 18-minute rest, and have them do a 23-second run all out, see where they end up at. So these are the things that on the phosphate level that challenge them to become better doublers. I think we've gotten away from the science and the work of the sport. Again, I'm very big on work capacity, and so work capacity is the glue that holds everything together. And so if you have not built the work capacity up to the level where they can do both effectively, then you need to only do one. But in today's world, with that's all on social media, there are so many people talking about not doing it to the tempo. If you do that, you're teaching people how to be distance runners and things, and that's just not true. If you do things the right way, then you're going to be able to utilize that as a way of as an aid to help the athlete become better. I always tell people all the time when they ask me. I remember years ago was a debate about heart rate monitors for sprint groups and everything, and that's like, should sprinters do basic heart rate work? And the answer to my question for me was always yes. And the reason why I'm going to say yes to that is because, number one, if your heart rate, if you're unable to recover after a rep and your heart rate is up, does that not affect the next race that you have? Of course, you have not recovered well enough for your body to come under what I call calm itself down to perform the next rep. So if you're a sprint person trying to still recover and you ran 30, 40 minutes ago and your heart rate's still up, then that gives an indication of why intensive tempo and excessive tempo or even some type of circuit work is so important throughout the year, because if your heart rate is low for recovery, it impacts how well you perform in the next rep. And so I just look at those things as what I call some very practical things to consider when you're coaching people how to double. If their heart rate is up and they haven't recovered efficiently, then there's no way that the next rep is going to be good. As a matter of fact, they're more aligned to get hurt more than anything, because they haven't recovered much as they should. So when everybody's always, what I call, high intensity, high intensity, high intensity, and it takes some rest, but you haven't put the oxygen base in there, or the work capacity in there, or the circuit work necessary to hold those high efforts together, then you're normally going to get hurt. And then I said, well, the most important thing to me is if an athlete is having a hard time to recover, that gives an indication that it's not really in shape all the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. So you mentioned sprinters, you mentioned hurdlers. How would you say this relates to jumpers?
Yeah, I think jumpers on the runway no more than 10 seconds. So I think you can do a mini version of that. I wouldn't take a jumper and run. Like I said, I'm on the grass, so I can imagine taking a jumper and running on 6.53 turnarounds. On the grass, because the energy system isn't built for that. You've been training them a little bit differently. So I do think turnaround, some 50 turnarounds on the grass or things like that, in the 300 meter to the 800 meter work capacity range, it allows them to have better jumps late into the event. Because again, you still need work capacity. And if they go down there and jump an incredible distance, and then they haven't really done a whole lot of what I call sprint work to facilitate them getting on the runway and doing an additional 4 to 5 attempts, and then they jumped. Let's say they jumped 19, 10, and everything else 18 and 17 feet. That's a work capacity issue. That's not that the kid's not giving the effort, because I don't think anybody want to go out there and jump 19 feet on the first one or something, and then come back and jump almost 17, 18 feet, a foot off than what they did previously. So it just comes down to, again, work capacity and the athlete having the elasticity that they would incorporate into the system through bounding apparatuses and things like that. They would get the long jumper or the triple jumper or the high jumper up to where they can handle that. And I think, like I said, there's some great coaching going on throughout the country. Where some coaches are already incorporating a lot of these things, but generally speaking, for those who are just learning, you would want to make sure that, again, work capacity is high. The body does take the pounding on the jumps. The first thing that hits the ground in every event is the foot. So if you haven't prepared the athlete to take the pounding and what comes with the event that they are particularly participating in, then it makes it very difficult for them to be successful. Mm-hmm. Consistently.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Coach. So I have a question for you. So my daughter, I'm coaching my younger daughter. She's a freshman. We have 4 weekends to get to the state meet. So we're literally in this 4-week model that you're presenting here. And I need to get her to peak. I know there's a lot of parents and coaches out there that are right in championship season as well. So can you speak on that a little bit, like how to get their athlete to peak during this time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Again, I think, as I referenced earlier, it's all about looking at when the athlete had their best performance earlier in the year and what programming you utilize to get the peak. A lot of times, the coaches, talking about they don't want people to run too fast or they don't want this to happen. And I want to push back against that gently. Yeah, I never understood that to me is basically discrediting your own coaching. If you get an athlete to run faster than what you expected, and then you're saying they're running too fast too soon, then what was the purpose of actually coaching them? Because the whole idea is to get a result. So, and then at that point, when you get an athlete that's running that fast and they're doing well based on what you've given them, again, that's kudos to the coach and the athlete for being disciplined enough to get the result that you're looking for a lot sooner than later. So again, when that happens, you just got to readjust your training model to fit the speed and the jumping or the throwing of the athlete is at. At that point, you don't want to go back and say, "Oh my gosh, you're running too fast, so let me back you up," which I've heard some people do, and then the athlete ends up being slow because the body's ready to fire and do some things like that. So there's no such thing in my opinion. Running too fast early. There's my opinion on that would be again to revise, rethink, and review what you're doing, and then take it up another notch, and then meet the needs of the athlete where they're located. And then I think another good point. I think we mentioned this in the last episode that I believe athletes should basically be on the three peak model throughout the year, because if you run indoor, you're gonna have a peak in your indoor, and then if you run outdoor in the high school level, that's your second peak. Which would be at the state meets. And then if you're running age group track, you're generally going to have a third peak. But all these things have to be planned out. And then, there's something that that's just happening a little bit better in our sport. It's called collaboration. If the high school coach and the club coaches could collaborate, then the best interest of the athlete is going to be taken care of, and the athlete's going to be able to do what they needed to do to be successful. But unfortunately, like anything else in life, that's one of the areas that we as a sport need to continually grow in. But there are some very, very good club coaches out here, and there's some very good high school coaches out here. But all I know is this, that it's the system that creates the athlete. The athlete is a byproduct of a very good training system. The athlete can have the gifts all they want, but at the end of the day, if the gifts are not being stewarded, or what I call stewardship over the talent, is not being exercised by the people involved in the coaching, then the athlete it suffers from that. So I think it's we're at a time now that collaboration and working together is very paramount, because getting a scholarship to a Power Four and getting an NIL, these things are very real things now. So I believe with that being said, that it's very important that the coaches work together to collaborate and evolve with the sport so you can do what's best for the athletes. But I do believe that there's a three-peak system that should be in place, and I think a lot of times when people use what I call single peak models, they're using those models based off off the Soviet Union and Poland and the Eastern Bloc way back, But people fail to realize the weather over there was atrocious. You couldn't train in that weather because it was snow and cold, all the way until May. So the United States, we got hot weather all over the country. There's some other areas that are like those Eastern Bloc countries where you might only be to use one or two peaks, and do it. But using just one single peak for the whole year, I think that's very challenging for the athlete, because you're omitting a lot of opportunities for the athlete to get better through competition.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak like specifically? So there may be some young coaches out there who are like, they know they want to get their athlete to peak. They might know to push more, run less, whatever. But can you give some specifics on like the best say they have a 2-week period or 3-week period just to get their athletes to be faster at the end of that 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, I just think max velocity and running is good. I think I referenced Charlie Francis with his high-low models. I believe that from a conceptual perspective, I think Charlie Francis is one of the most brilliant strength coaches ever. And so from that conceptual perspective of doing high-low, if you did high-low, that will lead yourself into, great results, because in his model, he used high intensity, and then he came back with intensive tempo or extensive tempo up to, 2,600 meters for some of his athletes. But then remember now, these are adults that he was using this model on, so you might want to cut that down to about 1,200 for a high schooler to do some type of tempo work, something like that. But the modification of the tempo work need to be in consideration. And I think one of the most important things too that some coaches don't have is an energy system chart that tells you how much volume you should use in certain energy systems as you lead out through the year. So I think if you're a sprint coach or distance coach, but definitely a sprint coach, I think it'd be in your best interest to find a chart that has energy system systems on there, and that usually comes to you getting going to level 1 or level 2. But there are some on the internet, I'm sure you can find, that will tell you how much excessive tempo to use and interval tempo to use and short speed endurance under 7 seconds. How much volume do to that? Cause I had that kind of memorized, but that's what I used early on. I can take you back to some workouts that I used 15, 20 years ago, and I got the volume on each set on each sheet. So I know exactly how to progressively overload the energy system to do my restoration model that I'm talking about. But I think it's just all about, again, revisiting what you're doing, understanding how much volume goes with each energy system that you're trying to work, and then stay within those guidelines. And then if you just move up 10 meters the second week, that's still a progressive overload. Now I don't recommend going, like you started at 100 meters and then the second week you at 1,000. Now, granted, that's going to shock the system and cause injury because that's a quite a bit much, but a 10% or 15% increase will not do anything differently for the athlete. And so if you're trying to peak in this time of the year, again, it's good to revisit when they were running fast, and then just realize that if you haven't had a peak yet, then the best way to get it is to be very mindful of that by putting a workload on the athlete and let the athlete's body the second week super compensate with more rest. So that's the time where you might practice and then do cold bath and rest on the second day, and then come out the third day and do something else in speed endurance area from anywhere from 80 to 250 meters at high intensity, and then take Thursday rest again and extend a warm up on Friday, and then you're racing on Saturday. So again, it just all comes down to you understanding the programming of how to program the energy system that you're trying to utilize and have it come to life at the right time. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's be the best thing to do, in those situations. But yeah, I just think that it's just a lot out there, and being around it a long time and being, I think it's the success I've had, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to have it. But I put a lot of work into understanding my own training system and then implement it. And everything that I do is basically really just off the science of the sport. So I've taken my collegiate model that I've utilized collegiately for all those years, and I use it in my private sector coaching. I just water it down because I know it's based strictly off of the energy system development of the athlete. So I can utilize my collegiate system workouts on my private clients, and then I've shared it with the coaches that are working with me in the Nike Elite program. We have very good intentional conversations about development and about energy system and how much volume to use and all that good stuff. And so I've seen some great results out of those coaches. And like I said, there's some great coaches out here, and but to really I think in order to learn, you got to ask folk and be willing to listen and all of that. And then I think on top of that, all of us don't have the same type of success. There's some of us who've had tremendous success and coached Olympians. There'll be some state coaches that have coached conference champions. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting a result, high performance. Your coaching should take you to whatever direction you can take you. But if you not have gotten to those areas, you can't, I think, sometimes sit back and say, "Oh man, that's old school." Nah, that's science. The science of the sport requires certain things. I had a lunch meeting today with someone that's 31 years old, and we were talking about, hey, at 31, 32 years old, you don't need to do 8 weeks of general prep. Sometimes you may cut it back to 6 because your training age is so high, and you're going through on a regular basis. You don't need that particular amount of general prep unless you're going to open up your season a little bit later. So again, on a case by case basis, you got to make the decisions based on your own personal variables and training environment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think the last thing I want to just definitely put out there, a lot of people ask about running flies. I think I had a couple of DMs on that. And so the best way to do flies and during this time of the year is, one, you do them only if the athlete's extremely healthy and has shown the propensity to handle it. Everybody can't do fly 30s or fly 60s. They're better off just doing regular standardized speed development. But even in the progressive overload of that, you can start off with like say you're doing a 30-meter fly. You may start off with a 10-meter run in week 1, and then week 2 you start off with a 20-meter run in, and then week 3 you go to a 30-meter run in, and then you run 30 meters. So again, it's all about understanding the manipulation of the variable of volume as it
Yeah.
relates to the athlete, and and how impactful that's going to be on an athlete. I don't expect a high school athlete to run a fly 90.
Mhm.
Those are things that are done at the
Yeah.
collegiate level, in the pro level, basically. Some coaches that are really good at doing that type of work, they take them all the way out that far.
Yeah.
But to take a high schooler and run a fly 90 or something like that, or a flying 100 or something, that I've heard people do.
Yeah.
Then they end up while the athlete ends up getting hurt.
Mhm.
That's probably why their body's not able to sustain that just yet. They're not
Yeah.
prepared for that.
Mhm.
And then I think as you ask the question, then it comes into the weight training. Some people ask, should I start weight training throughout the week? Well, I generally during this time of the year, I try to make sure I still lift twice, even before championship season. Now I'll cut the reps, the sets down to one. I've done
Mhm.
extensive research on weight training, and a lot of times it says 3 to 5 sets and all that other stuff. But I usually
Mhm.
start with three in the fall, and then in season we're doing 2 sets of
Mhm.
everything, and then in championship season, starting 21 days out, we go to one set of 8, one set of 6, one set of 4. And then
And how
my
many days out? I'm sorry. How many days out before competition with the weights?
I'm still lifting all the way until that Wednesday. Even though we may race on Saturday, we're gonna lift until Wednesday.
Okay.
And throughout the the year, we actually left on Friday morning for a race on Saturday.
Yeah.
With my kids, because
Mhm.
the program, my business model is that I'm a college preparatory program, and teaching kids to have college readiness.
Yeah.
So I'm able to do that, and then like I said, we'll lift Friday morning and still race on Saturday.
Mhm.
But it's 50%, 66% what they're supposed to do. The reps are a certain number.
Yeah.
Once my training model in the fall is a little bit different than it is in the spring. In the spring, my heaviest lift day is on Monday.
Mhm.
And then we'll come back and lift on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and Friday, based on what time of the year it is. When we get to this part of the year, I'm gonna still try to get 2 lift days in, which are Monday and Wednesday, because if you look at it from a long-term development model, athletes that don't have a really long training age, their muscles can go into atrophy within 48 to 72 hours and start losing strength. So I try to make sure that if I'm lifting or doing body weight stuff, whatever the case may be, we're gonna do that all the way until Wednesday. Because
Mhm.
if you take that time off for a whole week, then
Mhm.
you try to get back to it. The body's in atrophy. Then you start getting dings and nicks.
Yeah.
So again, a training age that's really low in your
Mhm.
athletes, you generally want to try to keep them lifting as much as possible. Generally, that's up until Wednesday before you got to compete on the weekend. Like I said, this time of the year, we do 2 times a week.
Well, Coach Daniels, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. Um, where can our audience find you if they want to reach out to you, send you a DM, or hit you up for some advice, or maybe some lessons for their kids?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You can hit me up on Daniel's High Performance on Instagram, and my email address is danielshighperformance@gmail.com. And I'm also having a clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina on July the 11th through the 12th at Charlotte Christian High School. That's going to have the sprint hurdles and jumps in there. And I'll have Ralph Jones and some other guests that are coming in to help be guest clinicians with me in July. So July 11th and 12th in Charlotte, North Carolina, we'll have a 2 day camp/clinic. Coaches can sign up and come in and shadow us at the clinic and be right there on site with us and walk around, and then we usually have a classroom section at the clinic for the coaches as well, where we get into more conversations about energy system development and what to do during general prep and all that good stuff. So I welcome anybody that wants to come to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'll put the link in my on my Instagram, and I'll send it to you all to send out to the audience. But yeah, I do Nike U.S. sports camps as well, and so we have one July the 11th and through the 12th, and then in the fall I'll be doing going back to doing what I call our hurdle collective with Marlon Odom and Devin Noel out of the Houston area. Devin is hurdlenomics, and Marlon Odom is hurdle science. And so we created something called the Hurdle Collective a couple of years ago. So we're going to bring that back out this year in the fall, and we're going to have a number of clinics in the South, and we're going to end up at the AP Ranch in Fort Worth, Texas, in November with that particular series, and then we'll hit right into the season.
Perfect. Thank you again, Coach. You provided so much value to our audience, so we really appreciate that. This is Will Humphreys on behalf of Coach Lonnie Davis and Anthony Lewis. We're Beyond the Blocks, and thank you for tuning in. And look for us on YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify and Apple Podcasts.